January 7, 1945, dawned cold and crisp in the Ardennes, where the snow lay thick like a frozen shroud over the battlefield. Inside a makeshift British press tent, the air buzzed with anticipation as reporters huddled around, their notebooks ready, cameras poised. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, Monty to his admirers, stepped up to the cluster of microphones, his uniform impeccable, his beret tilted just so, his face, sharp and angular like a predator's, broke into a confident smile, not the grim determination of a man fresh from the carnage, but the self-assured grin of someone convinced of his own invincibility. He launched into his monologue without notes, his voice clipped and precise, recounting the Battle of the Bulge as if it were a chess match he had masterminded from start to finish. The battle has been very interesting. I think possibly one of the most interesting and tricky battles I have ever handled, he declared, his words dripping with understatement that bordered on condescension. He spoke of deploying the whole available power of the British group of armies, how he had put it into the fight with a bang, stabilizing the chaos. Yet, in his narrative, the American forces appeared as disorganized pawns, rescued by his superior strategy. He barely nodded to the desperate stands at Bastogne or the grueling advances by Patton's Third Army, instead, framing the entire ordeal as a testament to his personal genius. The reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a scoop while 300 meters away at Supreme Allied headquarters. General Dwight D. Eisenhower gripped a transcript of the speech, his knuckles white, his usually affable demeanor shattered by a surge of icy rage. This moment wasn't born in isolation. It was the culmination of a fractured alliance forged in the fires of necessity rather than mutual admiration. The Anglo-American partnership in World War II had always been a delicate balance, a marriage of convenience between an empire on the wane and a rising superpower. On one side stood Eisenhower, Ike, the Kansas farm boy turned supreme commander, a man whose strength lay not in flashy tactics but in the art of coalition building. He was the ultimate diplomat in olive drab, skilled at herding cats generals with egos as vast as the fronts they commanded. Ike believed in unity, in sharing credit, in viewing the war as a collective effort where every nation's contribution mattered. He had navigated the treacherous waters of international politics, soothing British pride while harnessing American industrial might. Opposite him was Montgomery, the victor of El Alamein, a tactical wizard whose brilliance was matched only by his unyielding narcissism. Monty saw himself as the war's leading man, a solo act surrounded by lesser players. He decorated his command trailer with portraits of defeated German generals, sipping tea amid maps that he pored over with the conviction that only he could divine the path to victory. His disdain for American methods was no secret. He viewed Eisenhower's broad front strategy advancing across a wide swath rather than concentrating on a single thrust as amateurish recipe for dilution and delay. For months, Monty had lobbied relentlessly for total command of ground forces, essentially proposing that Ike step aside and let the professional handle the fighting. These demands echoed through cables to London and Washington, testing the limits of alliance diplomacy. The roots of this rivalry stretched back to the North African campaign, where Monty had turned the tide against Rommel at El Alamein in 1942, earning him a knighthood and the adoration of the British public. But even then, his prickly personality alienated allies. He clashed with American generals over everything from supply lines to battle plans, dismissing their enthusiasm as naivety. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, the tensions had escalated. Monty commanded the initial ground forces, but his slow progress in capturing can drew criticism from across the Atlantic. Ike, promoted to supreme commander, had to mediate constantly, defending Monty to skeptical American brass while urging the Briton to temper his arrogance. Churchill, ever the protector of British prestige, intervened repeatedly, cabling Washington to preserve Monty's position. "He is a great soldier," the Prime Minister insisted, but privately he worried about the strain on the alliance. Ike tolerated it all, valuing Monty's undeniable skill on the battlefield. The Americans supplied the manpower and materiel tanks rolling off Detroit assembly lines, bombers darkening European skies, while the British offered seasoned leadership honed from years of fighting alone. It was a symbiotic relationship, but as 1944 waned, the scales tipped decisively toward American dominance. The U.S. forces now outnumbered the British 3-1, their logistics a marvel of efficiency. Monty, however, clung to the outdated notion of British superiority, blind to the shifting dynamics. As autumn turned to winter in 1944, the Western Front simmered with unspoken resentments. Monty's command trailer, a mobile fortress of order amid the mud and chaos, became his echo chamber. Surrounded by yes-men and his cherished portraits, Rommel, staring back as a trophy, he drafted missives to London decrying American shortcomings. He lambasted General Omar Bradley's dispositions as dangerously thin, Patton's dashes as foolhardy risks. In Monty's worldview, Eisenhower's insistence on a broad advance was squandering momentum. He advocated a narrow thrust, a single powerful spearhead under his control, to pierce the German heartland. He confided in aides that without his guidance, the Allies would flounder. This hubris wasn't mere vanity. It stemmed from a deep-seated belief in his destiny. Monty had risen from a troubled childhood, abused by a domineering mother, finding solace in military discipline to become Britain's most celebrated general. His victories in Africa and Sicily had validated his methods. Meticulous planning, overwhelming force, minimal casualties. But this success bred isolation. He rarely socialized, abstained from alcohol and tobacco, and viewed emotions as weaknesses. Ike, by contrast, was the everyman leader, chain-smoking cigarettes, playing bridge with staff, fostering loyalty through warmth. Their clash was inevitable, a collision of cultures as much as personalities. The spark that ignited the powder keg came on December 16, 1944. When Hitler's last desperate gamble unfolded in the Ardennes Operation Wacht, am Rhein unleashed 200,000 German troops, backed by panzers and artillery, smashing through the weakly held American lines in a bid to split the Allies and capture Antwerp. The surprise was total fog and snow, grounded Allied air support, communications faltered, and green U.S. divisions bore the brunt. Bastogne became a symbol of defiance, where the 101st Airborne, surrounded and besieged, held out against overwhelming odds. Nuts, replied Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe to a German surrender demand, encapsulating American grit. In the South, Patton pivoted his Third Army northward in a feat of logistical wizardry, slogging through blizzards to relieve the pressure. But the bulge in the line created a command crisis. Bradley's 12th Army Group, headquarters in Luxembourg, was cut off from his northern forces, the 1st and 9th Armies now isolated amid the fray. Ike, assessing the maps at Versailles, made a tough call to ensure unity. He temporarily transferred those 200,000 American troops to Monty's 21st Army Group. It was a pragmatic move, not a slight, but to Bradley, it felt like a gut punch of demotion in favor of his rival. Patton exploded in private, calling it the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. The Americans expected Monty to act with deference, as a custodian preserving their autonomy. Instead, Monty descended like a conqueror. Arriving at the U.S. First Army headquarters in a convoy of armored cars, he strode in without pleasantries, his liaison officers in tow. He ignored the haggard American staff, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights, and dismissed their defensive plans out of hand. "This is a mess," he proclaimed, redrawing lines and halting counterattacks to consolidate. He insisted on British-style organization, down to tea breaks and map markings. When meeting Bradley, he didn't travel to the Americans' HQ. Bradley had to come to him, enduring a lecture on tactics as if he were a novice. Monty's aides distributed memos critiquing US methods, fueling resentment. American officers whispered of mutiny, one colonel reportedly saying, "I'd rather fight the Krauts than take orders from that limey." Yet Monty stabilized the North, blunting the German advance through methodical defense. His tactics worked, but at the cost of alliance harmony. He failed to grasp the human element, the pride of men who had crossed an ocean to fight, only to be treated as inferiors. As the bulge began to deflate by late December, with German fuel running low and skies clearing for Allied bombers, Monty prepared his victory lap, oblivious to the brewing storm. The January 7th press conference was Monty's fatal overreach, a performance that twisted facts into self-aggrandizement. Standing before the microphones, he painted a picture of American disarray, salvaged by British acumen. "As soon as I saw what was happening, I took certain steps myself to ensure that if the Germans got to the Meuse, they would certainly not get over the river," he boasted, implying he had foreseen the crisis others missed. He praised the American soldier as fighting spirit but framed their efforts as needing his direction. "The battle became a proper dog-esque breakfast until I was called in." No mention of the 19,000 U.S. dead, the frostbitten feat at Elsenborn Ridge, or Patton's 133-mile march in 48 hours. The British press lapped it up, headlines blaring Monty masters the bulge and British genius saves allies. But across the pond, outrage erupted. Bradley, reading the transcript in his Spartan HQ, slammed his fist on the table. "I've had it," he told aides. "I'll resign before serving under that man again. Patton, ever the firebrand, wired Ike. Let me go after him personally." The U.S. War Department buzzed with calls for Monty's head. Congressmen demanded explanations. Even neutral observers noted the distortion. Monty had commanded only the northern flank, while the bulk of the fighting fell to Americans. At Supreme Headquarters, Ike's office became ground zero for the crisis. The Supreme Commander, usually even-keeled, paced with uncharacteristic fury. For years he had played referee, absorbing Monty's barbs, calling Ike a nice chap but no soldier, and shielding him from Washington hawks. But this public humiliation crossed the line, threatening morale and the coalition's fabric. Ike consulted his inner circle, Chief of Staff Walter Bedell Smith, who urged action, Bradley seething, even Churchill's liaison. The decision crystallized: no more appeasement. Ike drafted a cable to the combined Chiefs of Staff, outlining the irreparable breach. "The situation has become unworkable," he wrote, "then the hammer. It is him or me." He would resign if Monty stayed. This wasn't hyperbole. Ike knew his value as the glue holding the Allies together. The draft went to Monty's chief of staff, Major General Francis Freddie de Gingen, a savvy diplomat who bridged the divide. De Gingen's face paled as he read it. "This is the end," he muttered, racing through a snowstorm to Monty's trailer. Monty's HQ was a bubble of complacency, the field marshal sipping tea, reviewing maps, convinced of his triumph. De Gingen burst in, cutting through pleasantries. "Ike's firing you," he said bluntly, describing the ultimatum and Washington's backing. Monty chuckled at first. "He needs me too much," but de Gingen's grim details pierced the armor. The reality sank in. Churchill couldn't intervene. The Americans held the cards. Monty deflated, his hawkish features softening into vulnerability. For the first time, fear gripped the indomitable general. He had misjudged Ike, seeing weakness where resolve lay hidden. De Gingen helped draft the responsa, groveling letter, handwritten to underscore humility. "Dear Ike," it began, "I am distressed that my actions may have upset you. Whatever your decision, I will accept it loyally. I am your very devoted subordinate." Monty, it was abject surrender, a far cry from his usual demands. Sent overnight, it arrived on Ike's desk the next morning. Ike read it without fanfare. His anger cooling into pragmatism, he accepted, filing the ultimatum away in his secret drawer, insurance against future insubordination. The reply was curt, acknowledgement without warmth. The crisis passed publicly as a non-event, with press releases affirming unity, but privately, the rift endured. Ike shifted favoritism to Bradley, promoting him to command the main thrust into Germany. When the Rhine crossings came in March 1945, Bradley's forces stole the show with a surprise bridge at Rivalry, while Monty's elaborate Operation Plunder, with airborne drops and amphibious assaults, became a sideshow. Patton, ever irreverent, quipped, "Monty's crossing the Rhine with a brass band after, we've already done it." The incident underscored America's ascendance. By VE Day on May 8, 1945, U.S. troops dominated the occupation zones, shaping the post-war order. Churchill lamented privately that Monty had nearly wrecked the alliance, confiding to aides, "The need for British restraint in a U.S.-led world." This episode transcended personal drama, revealing deeper truths about leadership in total war. Monty's tactical prowess, evident in his containment of the Bulge, couldn't compensate for his emotional blind spots. He treated allies as subordinates, ignoring the psychological toll of condescension. Ike, conversely, mastered the intangibles: trust, morale, diplomacy. His ultimatum wasn't vengeance, but necessity, preserving the mission over any individual. In the Ardennes frozen hell, where G is endured -20 degrees and panzer barrages, respect mattered as much as ammunition. Monty's hubris nearly fractured that bond, a reminder that genius without humility is a liability. The war's final months saw Monty sidelined in influence, his voice muted in strategic councils. He kept his rank, paraded in victory celebrations, but the inner circle knew he had been checked. Eisenhower's quiet victory with a pen outshone any battlefield triumph, ensuring the Allies crossed the finish line together. The broader context of the Bulge itself amplified the irony. Hitler's offensive, fueled by delusions of repeating 1940s success, cost Germany irreplaceable reserves, 250,000 casualties, 600 tanks lost. It delayed the Allied advance but hastened the Reich's collapse, exposing the Eastern Front to Soviet onslaughts. American resilience shone through. The Malmedy massacre, where SS troops executed 84 U.S. prisoners, only stiffened resolve. Stories emerged of heroism like Sergeant Alvin York-style stands by isolated units, or engineers blowing bridges under fire. Monty, in claiming credit, overlooked these narratives, alienating the very men who turned the tide. Post-war, the rivalry lingered in memoirs. Monty's 1958 book criticized Ike harshly, prompting a rare public rebuke. Ike, in his own writings, was gracious but firm, emphasizing coalition over conquest. Their post-war meeting at Gettysburg in 1957, debating Civil War tactics, showed lingering tensions, Monty critiquing Lee, Ike defending Grant's broad approach, mirroring their World War II debates. Yet, beneath the acrimony lay mutual respect, buried deep. Monty once admitted privately that Ike's political savvy won the war. Ike acknowledged Monty's battlefield acumen, even recommending him for honors. The January crisis, though, marked the pivot, from British mentorship to American leadership, foreshadowing NATO's structure and the Cold War's alliances. It highlighted war's human dimension, egos clashing amid existential stakes. In the end, the Bulge wasn't just about territory. It was about forging unity from discord. Monty's near downfall served as a cautionary tale. No general, however brilliant, stands above the collective will. As the snow melted in the Ardennes, revealing the scars of battle, so too did the alliance emerge stronger, tempered by confrontation. Victory in Europe came not despite the rivalry, but through overcoming it, a testament to Ike's enduring legacy as the architect of triumph.